The Department of Correctional Services says former President Jacob Zuma is still in hospital after he was granted medical parole yesterday. Zuma's parole conditions mean he can be discharged and treated at home, subject to supervision by Correctional Services. A decision to release Zuma from prison due to his ill health comes less than 2 months after he began serving a 15-month sentence for contempt of court. He was admitted to hospital early last month for treatment for an undisclosed condition. Correctional Services has given no details on his illness or whether his health has deteriorated since undergoing surgery. The exact nature of the former president's ill health is expected to come under scrutiny ahead of his next court appearance in his corruption trial. For more on former President Zuma's legal woes, we speak now to legal expert Advocate Paul Hoffman, who is with Accountability Now. A very good morning, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good morning, Des, and good morning to your viewers as well. We seem to have a small technical hitch with the sound, but I'm hearing enough to answer questions, I hope.
I hope so, because we can hear you perfectly. A lot has been said since yesterday about what this means. But just in terms of the former president's rescission application and corruption trial, what can we expect?
Well, as far as the corruption trial is concerned, the process will continue. The state will insist on the medical report that it is entitled to get itself in terms of an order of court that was made by consent between Jacob Zuma's legal team and the prosecutors the last time the matter was in court. And if the examination reveals that he is not fit to stand trial, which is a different thing to not fit to remain incarcerated, that will impact on the decision-making of the judge in the matter. As far as the rescission application is concerned, that is a civil case in which argument has been completed, and the next step in that case will be unaffected by the decision of Arthur Fraser to put Mr. Zuma on a medical parole at this stage.
I'll ask you a bit about the decision by Arthur Fraser later on, but you were saying that they will depend on a medical report. A lot has been said about which medical report to consider. Which medical report was considered in making the decision to grant him parole? If the medical reports, and you'll know that the National Prosecuting Authority has not yet been allowed to give the doctors of its choice access to Mr. Zuma. If the medical reports are all to the same effect, there's no factual argument in the matter. If, however, the doctors who have reported to Correctional Services, and I believe there are 2 reports already, are preferred to the doctors who give evidence against their opinion in the criminal case that is pending in the Pietermaritzburg High Court, then the judge is going to have to make a call as to whose opinion is the correct opinion. That's what you have judges for, to resolve disputes. And that dispute will have to be resolved in the context of whether Mr. Zuma is fit to stand trial on the counts that have been pending against him since Shabir Shaik was convicted for corrupting Mr. Zuma. The sentiment that this is another Shabir Shaik situation unfolding, has this been a conversation at all in the legal circles?
Yes, indeed. You'll remember that the law was changed after Shabir Shaik was sent home to die by a medical parole board all those years ago. And Section 79 of the Correctional Services Act has been very much
tightened up. The opposition in Parliament have indicated that they will get the matter discussed by the Justice and Correctional Services Portfolio Committee, that they will seek information in terms of the Promotion of Access to Information Act in order to see whether the decision is a well-informed one, and whether Arthur Fraser's exercise of his discretion to grant medical parole to his former boss. Remember, Mr. Zuma appointed him as the chief spook in South Africa. So the question will be whether the rule of law has been complied with in the decision made to put Mr. Zuma on medical parole. And that means that there will be an inquiry into whether the decision is rational in the sense that it serves a legitimate purpose of the governance of correctional services. If it doesn't, it will be held invalid, and that will be the end of that. There may also be an attack on the impartiality of Mr. Fraser, and the question may be raised as to whether or not he ought to have recused himself from making a decision on whether or not to grant medical parole to Mr. Zuma because of his past relationship with Mr. Zuma. If Arthur Fraser was a member of the National Prosecuting Authority, you may rest assured that the head of the new investigating directorate would call him a saboteur planted to see to it that those involved in state capture enjoy impunity indefinitely rather than face trial for crimes that they are alleged to have committed.
Interesting choice of words, saboteur planted. It takes me to a conversation I heard with the Department of Correctional Services earlier, where they were asked who applied for the parole, and they were not able to respond to this. Does it make a difference if it's the doctors or Mr. Zuma himself who applied for the parole?
Yes, that is an interesting question, and it does make a difference, because if the doctors did it, then it is an indication that they are being less than professional and objective in the way that they have gone about the task facing them. Whereas if Mr. Zuma has done it, he has received a report from the doctors, the two teams of doctors who have examined him, and he has made the call that their evidence justifies the exercise of Arthur Fraser's discretion in in Zuma's favor, so that he does get the medical parole. You know, we're not talking about a great deal here, because 2 months of the 4 months that Mr. Zuma is obliged to serve have already elapsed, will elapse in the next day or two. I think, I think he's been in jail since the 8th, and it's now the 6th, and that was 2 months ago. So he would be eligible for parole anyway, irrespective of his health condition, in 2 months from now. So making a huge song and dance about whether he should be sent home 2 months early is perhaps not the biggest issue facing the nation at the moment.
The other issue that has come out as a result of the announcement of the parole is the issue of equality before the law, with the department insisting that all prisoners are treated the same and considered for parole where it applies. Do you think this has been the case here?
Well, it's impossible to answer that question, because I haven't seen the medical reports, which have been kept under close wraps, and I haven't seen the reasons given by Mr. Fraser for the decision to exercise his discretion in favor of Mr. Zuma. So I would be looking into a crystal ball But I've already pointed out that Mr. Fraser enjoyed very high office in correctional services due to being favored by Mr. Zuma in the appointment of the head of the State Security Agency before he took up his position in correctional services. I think I referred to correctional services a moment ago when I should have been referring to the State Security Agency.
Let me ask you to look into another crystal ball, the Democratic Alliance saying that they want Mr. Fraser to answer to this in Parliament. And as history will tell us, whenever they haven't gotten any joy in Parliament, they will go the legal route. Do they have a leg to stand on?
Yes, it is certainly open to any political party, including the Democratic Alliance, to exercise oversight on the way that the Correctional Services Department is being run and on the way that decision-making takes place in the Correctional Services Department. So the legality, the rationality, the constitutionality, and the appropriateness of the decision made by Mr. Fraser and whether he should have been the decision maker at all is part of the work of Parliament. The Justice and Correctional Services Portfolio Committee has the power to subpoena Mr. Fraser to come to a committee meeting and under oath explain exactly what has gone on. That accords with the ideas, the values of the Constitution, that governance in South Africa needs to be open, not opaque, needs to be accountable, not simply at the whim of a friend, and it needs also to be responsive to the needs of the people, and obviously equality before the law being guaranteed to all in the Bill of Rights is one of the needs of the people that has been identified in our Constitution. So I have no difficulty with the notion that Mr. Fraser should be put on the carpet in Parliament and asked the hard questions that you are asking me now.
Advocate Paul Hoffman, SC, thank you so much for making the time. Of course, a continuing conversation, Advocate Hoffman, a legal expert with accountability now on this that remains a big conversation around the country. And for now, let's take a look at the tweets that have come through still in relation to this conversation, where we asked you what your thoughts are about the parole. Lechasa Patlamullo saying Salochani Batubage Mr. Zuma was supposed to finish his jail term without a parole because he was head of state. He was supposed to be punished so that all ministers, mayors, councillors, etc. who are corrupt can see him suffering.